Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning or good evening if you're watching this on recording. Welcome to this Interchange webinar. Here we're going to talk today about value of partnerships in unlocking transport and urban regeneration. My name is Jonathan Spruce. I'm a discipline director at Stantec UK, and I'm really pleased today to be able to introduce a great panel where we'll have a great discussion about what makes a good partnership. I think we can all think about partnerships that really work, whether they're cultural partnerships, before like Lennon and McCartney, partnerships in our own lives, like our relationships with our family and our friends and our colleagues, and also maybe in that latter bit, partnerships that don't work as well. So we're going to try and tease a little bit today about what those factors are, what makes partnerships really work, what the value of partnerships works, and how partnerships can better understand the outcomes that we're trying to do through urban regeneration and transport transformation. This is one of a series of webinars organised as part of the Interchange conference. If you haven't already, please register for Interchange. It is one of the foremost conferences going in March next year, and we can carry on this conversation between now and then, and have lots more conversation between now and then. You will realise that, unfortunately, one of our pre-advertised attendees, Jane from Glasgow City Council, is ill today. So, assuming that she's watching this and not watching a repeat of Homes Under the Hammer at the moment, I just want to say get well soon, Jane, and we look forward to greeting you on a webinar sometime soon. As well as the speakers, we're going to ask for you a little bit of work. So I'm going to launch a few polls. So in your bottom part of your Zoom screen, you should see some poll questions. There's 4 questions. If you could answer them, they're very simple questions. You can answer them during the course of the conversation, and we'll come back to them as well, because some of them relate to some of the questions I'm going to ask my panel. But without further ado, I'm going to ask each of my panels to give a short introduction to themselves and as to their particular experience and what they're hoping to get out of today as well, so that you can meet them and greet them before we get into the discussion. So first of all, I'm going to call on Rosemary, who's the lead strategic development manager at Transport Greater Manchester, to do a little bit of introduction to herself, and then I'm going to try and load a few slides that Rosemary wants me to share about some of the work she's been doing in Greater Manchester. So Rosemary, over to you.
Hi, thank you very much, Jonathan. As Jonathan has introduced, I am Rosemary Atuah, the lead strategic development manager at TFGM. I work with our Northern Powerhouse Rail and High Speed team, where we collaborate with partners across GM, central government, and the wider Northwest to ensure benefits of schemes such as NPR are maximised in Greater Manchester and the wider region, providing value for money and delivering the best possible social, economic growth and environmental outcomes. I began my career as an environmental impact consultant, specializing in project management and design development. Over time, I realized that I wanted to influence decisions earlier on in the process, not just make mitigation impacts later on in the process. So I joined TFGM to help shape transport policies and strategies from the outset. My career journey may resonate with some of you on the call who may have changed career paths. So I'm looking to sharing my experience in today's discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Did you want to give your presentation now? We'll go through it as well. Yeah,
I can. So as I said earlier, I'm working currently on the Northern Powerhouse Rail, specifically the Liverpool to Manchester Railway, which is part of the Northern Powerhouse Rail. LMR is a catalyst for growth. We are looking to push that because we believe it could deliver job growth, residential and commercial development. It's not just a high-speed project, it's about increased frequency of service, released capacity, reliability, and reliance. It would enable fast movements on the existing lines. So the main purpose of LMR is to provide additional capacity, taking fast services of those lines, thereby enabling reliability of service. There is so much developable land around the stations. There is a wider focus on national and local integration of services, enabling passengers to make seamless journeys and not just realizing journey time benefits. Part of that new infrastructure would also call out new growth areas such as Manchester Airport, which did not exist when the existing lines were built. Its alignment offers the most effective way to optimize east-west and north-south connectivity. So with capacity constraints worsening on the West Coast main line, this enduring solution will make sure that there is integration between LMR and the wider NPR program for maximum benefits. Now, this webinar focuses on getting movement and connectivity right in towns and cities and unlocking urban value. So whilst meeting the aspiration of future users, I will touch on the ambitions for the proposed stations at Manchester Piccadilly and Manchester Airport. The diagram on the right shows the alignment for the Liverpool to Manchester Railway from Manchester Piccadilly to Liverpool Lime Street and the wider opportunity it presents in connecting to Chester and Crewe and beyond. Can you move on to the next slide, please, Jonathan? So with regards to Manchester Piccadilly, as we all know, NPR is about improving east-west connectivity in the north. And we believe in Greater Manchester that this can be better achieved with an underground station rather than a through turnback station where passengers traveling from Liverpool to Hull would need to stop at Manchester Piccadilly, wait for the driver to change ends on the journey in the train station, and then continue journeys eastwards. Our proposal at Manchester Piccadilly maximizes the growth opportunity around the station area. There is about 52 hectares of land available for development in this area. A surface station will take up 15 hectares of this land, and this land would have otherwise provided opportunities in terms of about 40,000 jobs and 13,000 new homes, as well as 1 million square feet of commercial floor space. So what we're trying to do is combine the area's proximity to the expanding city centre, the university, and maximize on these growth opportunities, which is comparable in scale to King's Cross. It's similar in characteristics because it's also an edge of city centre location, and there is a large continuous area of underused lands that is prime for development. Manchester City Council are working on a strategic regeneration framework aimed at integrating the proposed station infrastructure with high quality public space, enhancing walkability, social interaction, and urban vibrancy. Can you move to the next slide, please, Jonathan? So with regards to Manchester Airport, it is the UK's third largest airport and the largest outside the London system. It already connects over 31 million passengers to over 200 destinations, and it contributes about 8.4 billion to the national economy. LMR is going to enhance the airport's catchment area, connecting cities to the northwest, the Pennines, and across to North Wales. We believe that this will strengthen the international trade and global supply chain, and it will also significantly reduce journey times, especially between Warrington and the airport, which will be cut in half. In terms of delivery, our local plan Places for Everyone has a few development sites in the airport area, and LMR supports the delivery of these mixed-use development sites, which is equivalent to the size of a new town. So there's a lot of opportunity in the airport area. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Can we move to the next slide, please? So what do we really want? We want a different approach to delivering LMR. Our main focus is getting it built once and built right. We want an approach that leverages the benefits of the devolved local authorities in the region, promoting collaboration across all levels of government. It's only right that the people in the place that the infrastructure would serve should inform its design to secure the best possible social, economic, and environmental outcomes for the region. We're also looking for an approach that promotes that place-based bottom-up approach to development that secures the best outcomes for the region. We're looking to collaborate with governments. Well, our understanding is the funding for national infrastructure would sit with government. However, the devolution deal in Greater Manchester can influence the prioritization and delivery of complementary projects to enhance connectivity in this area. So we're looking to achieve this by ensuring that the transport infrastructure aligns with the master planning in the area, supporting our growth ambition. Now, we can't do this properly without learning lessons from HS2. So we have already started taking on board some of the lessons from the Stewart Review. I believe recommendation 8 of the Stewart Review pushes for the formation of a supporting board that have the necessary expertise to support delivery of this sort of big national infrastructure projects. And our Liverpool-Manchester Railway Board already does that because its associated partnership boards provides that support and that expertise. Now, we would like to explore opportunities to work with governments. There's no secret that we are pushing for that, and we are hoping that we can explore public and private partnerships with businesses as well. Thank you.
That's great, Rosemary. There's some fantastic sort of elements there that we'll no doubt come back to in our chat later, but that's a really, really good example. So thank you for that. Rosemary talked about placemaking around stations. So who better to talk to about placemaking around stations than the head of placemaking at Platform 4, Stephen Tomlinson. So Stephen, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and then sort of picking up a little bit on what Rosemary said as well. Just take us through some of the key success factors you think about getting right in terms of partnerships around placemaking, please.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Steve Tomlinson. I work at Platform 4. I'll describe who Platform 4 are in a bit. So I'm head of placemaking there, and I lead on design and managing the kind of configuration of schemes around the country. As Platform 4, we work across the whole of England and Wales, and have been involved working in partnership with TFGM and many other local boroughs across the country. So Platform 4 have just been created from London and Continental Rail and Network Rail Property, who've merged to form a rail regeneration expert. And I've worked at London Continental Rail for about 5 years now. And if you don't know who London Continental Rail are, so our kind of most known projects are obviously King's Cross redevelopment, which we sold out of a number of years ago, and Manchester Mayfield and Network Rail. So the intention of Platform 4 is to bring the kind of expertise around thinking around the station, outside the station, and working closely with partners to deliver successful outcomes, and bring Network Rail's properties expertise together, really working well with the infrastructure all in and around the railway to combine to get the best of both worlds. So we're now kind of have the remit for the UK government to create dynamic and sustainable places across the country, and we're kind of leading on regen and redevelopment with our partners. What was the question again, Jonathan?
You were too busy to. So what do you think are some of the key success factors in getting partnerships right, Stephen? And also, where do we go wrong sometimes?
Well, I think success factors, I mean, it's a good one. I think some of these things are quite hard to measure. I think we need to kind of, I mean, I reflect on some earlier projects and kind of coming back to them after a length of time to see how they've stood the test of time. So prior to joining LCR and Platform 4, I worked for London Legacy Development Corporation, and I led on the delivery of, there was 4 stations around the Olympic Park, so Hackney Wick, Puddingmill Lane, Bromley by Bow, and Stratford Station. So I think one thing is it good? Is a kind of a simple kind of question and reflection on what does good look like? It's kind of quite often in government and on delivering, we start to assess by specific means and measurement factors, and the kind of can you see the wood for the trees kind of comes into play in terms of decision making. But I think reflecting on Hackney Wick Station in particular, I think, and then going back to it maybe 5 or so years later, I think it's really achieved what it said, and I'm thinking specifically outside the station, and I guess that's generally where my remit comes in. Is not do the trains run on time and what's the capacity. It's once you step off the train, what is your experience? How is that working? How is it integrated with the town or city or place? And is it right? So I think, and we've worked together in the past, and that's kind of really my approach in terms of starting with the town and making that kind of feed how the station should its form and how you can use it really. So to take that case, it was built to facilitate a connection north and south across the line. So we as well as kind of making it accessible and doing all the upgrades on the rail side of things, it really started to kind of connect pedestrians closer to the Olympic Park, but also to create a new route north and south through the underpass there, which is also the entrance to the station. And that getting that in the right place, I think, is quite a difficult thing to achieve. And we did lots of work in the background to kind of really specify that and to make it link with further bridges which are being delivered later, but also to work hand in glove with the development which happens around it. And that's things like getting the front doors of the adjacent development and the ground floor use to kind of really work with the pedestrian access and really make it, as well as being the right use, and to kind of enhance it, make the journey kind of the walking journey to the station, really enhance it. And I think that's kind of worked. It's facilitated the development. The development has kind of has brought a lot to the station in terms of how you get there, in terms of ground floor use, in terms of regeneration output, in terms of number of homes. So I think so. Those are some of the things we'd kind of look at more broadly. I'd say the other thing, and like talking about those onward connections, is that they really have aligned. It really has opened it up, and they're all coming to the fore. And those kind of early quite detailed studies in how the form and how you should get to the station have really kind of informed some of the kind of later moves in terms of developing out the site. So that's I hope that kind of answers your question.
Right. Yeah.
I think it's quite a governmenty thing to do, to kind of set a load of criteria, but I think we can sometimes be in danger of quantifying things too much, whereas some of the there's a qualitative kind of side to a lot of what we do here. And I think some of the things that were kind of in place around that, in terms of design review, support from the local authority, a real rigor in the authority making the adjacent development do exactly what the master plan is saying, and there's kind of some real successes there. So there's kind of the public governance, and when you're having to use that word, but
that's right.
I think it is, and also that advocacy for a plan and having people on board and kind of supporting that in the kind of once one approval's gone the wrong way, and it's difficult, but if everyone's kind of bought in, and you have councillors making decisions based on you've got to use the stuff around the station to support the experience of it, I think that's really part of it.
Well, that thought, because we'll come back to that in a bit, Stephen. I was really struck by that phrase. I'm going to nick it now. I apologise. The station working for the town and its surroundings. So as a professional of 30 odd years standing, I've spent lots of meetings talking about overhead line equipment and switches and signalling, and not enough time talking about how it interacts with its surroundings, its users. And I think that maybe is one of the failures that we need to try and address on that one. But we'll definitely come back to that one. Thank you, Stephen. Our third panelist today, anybody who's been to Interchange over the last 2 or 3 years knows that this gentleman is an absolute expert in partnerships and urban regeneration. So he's going to bring us his insights today, sort of thing, and contribute to the discussion. He's my colleague, Lee Stolworthy, who's the Director of Transport Planning at Stantec. So Lee, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself a little bit, and just picking up Stephen's point a little bit, what sometimes the things we get wrong, and what lessons can we learn from your experience in delivering urban regeneration through partnerships, please?
Okay, thank you, Jonathan, and afternoon, everyone. Lee Stolworthy, Director of Transport Planning at Stantec, based in the Birmingham office. started out as a civil engineer and made a hard right turn very early on into highways and traffic engineering, which then evolved into transport planning. So I've been doing it for a long time, been trying to understand various aspects of it, applying it to both in local government environments and development planning for land development projects in the private sector. So kind of a mixed experience and from both sides of the spectrum with regards to delivery of these sorts of things, critiquing planning applications versus writing planning applications. And I think I want to draw on something that we discussed at the Interchange earlier on in the year. We had a panel discussion, and there was a gentleman from Deloitte there, Ryan, who delivered a presentation on a report that they did, which was looking at the key success factors of transport projects. And there's some really interesting things that came out of that report. And I think the key one is, and it's it's not new and it's well known for a long time, but it's difficult to achieve, and that is, for every significant delivery of transport connectivity to support urban regeneration, you need strong political will and leadership, and the ability to stick to the plan in the long term beyond political cycles. That's a key success factor. So we need to have plans and strategies that can survive beyond political cycles. Is one key success factor. I think the long-term visioning and funding commitment is another one. If you haven't got funding commitment for the life cycle of the project, you are going to come up with against significant challenges to finalize and finish and to deliver what the original vision was, because you end up watering it down as you go along if the funding is not committed and secure, at least in the long term. The other thing that they came up with, which is quite interesting, and I think a very kind of a new way of looking at things, is the digital integration of the platforms that are required in order to be able to deliver those things, especially things like modal interchanges and those kind of things. If that's not integrated, and those are the kind of things that obviously Rosemary and her team are looking at quite significantly with the rollout of the new Piccadilly station and everything else. If they're not connected and seamless through data, in the future they will fail, or they will struggle, or they won't be as successful. Customer-centric design is critical. If you don't design for the people that you're planning for and implement accordingly, it's going to have problems like, New Street Station. I think we looked at that earlier in the year or last year with Network Rail, looking at the connectivity of different stations in Birmingham. New Street Station's an amazing station. It looks like a spaceship from the outside. You go inside, the wayfinding is great. It's all color-coded. But when you leave, you're not sure which exit you came from and where to go next, and how does it connect to the rest of the city. And that's from a user perspective. So we need to get those kind of things right. Obviously, in the future, sustainability, net zero, and decarbonisation is critical. And something that Rosemary mentioned, the Piccadilly station, the amount of jobs that are created through that and the economic benefit of it cannot be understated. And using that, I guess, things that I'm interested in at the moment and talking to various other people about is land value capture mechanisms associated with that, or the opportunities for land value capture to offset operational deficits for public transport. So I think there's so many things, but those are the key things that I think, and the Deloitte report is really good at articulating these things.
Thanks, Lee. That's really good. We'll definitely come back to one of your key points in a little bit, I think, because that's on users. Just keen to look at some of where the polls are going. You mentioned funding, I think, a couple of times. The people in the poll seem to definitely think funding constrains and actually hinders sometimes, I think, true partnership. And we'll return to that a bit later on. But I want to pick up the first poll that we've got going at the moment, which is about the users and how well we understand the users. So the viewers responding seem to think that we sometimes understand the users, but also sometimes not very well understand the users. So, Rosemary, as professionals, do you think we need to do more about understanding the users of the facilities we're trying to design at that design point, as opposed to doing something that is kind of engineering perfection or engineering excellence and finding out it doesn't work for our traveling public?
I do agree that we need to do more, because what we do is use data to support our design. And most times this data is collected by a survey, but research has shown that those who respond to the survey are usually white male, rather than ethnic minorities or women. So how can we capture their feedback and reflect that in our design? So we need a more gender inclusive, responsive approach to design. Wherever we do a project, we need to be thinking, is the data reflective of the local population? Do we need a local-based assessment to really understand the needs of the people? What we need to reflect upon as well is the long-term needs of the people in the area, because people come and go. So how do we do that? So within TFGM, we do undertake studies to understand people, and our research has shown that 25% of our households in GM do not have access to a car, which is why we are pushing our right mix vision, where we're trying to get people to rely less on cars and to use public transport. And so the B Network's vision is for that fully integrated, reliable, affordable transport system that's seamless. You pick transport in certain areas and they present single tickets. So the ticketing also has to work for those that use the transport service. You have parents who have to take multiple trips to the pharmacy, go shopping, pick up the kids. So you need the ticketing style that enables that to be done in an affordable way. So do we understand the persona of our users? Yes. Can more be done? Yes. Because at the end of the day, people's needs change and design needs to change to reflect that.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much for that. And I think please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A box, by the way. There's a question in there, or a suggestion really, about different lanes for different speeds of people at railway stations, which particularly took my eye, I think, in that having tried to get across from platform 16 to platform 0 at Leeds Station in about 2 minutes at peak times, I would definitely advocate for that sort of thing, Stephen. But anyway, you're more about outside the station rather than inside the station. So, Stephen, just picking up that point as well, and I think elaborating on what you said about the users, the work that you've done previously and looking to do at platform 4. Is that users in terms of passengers, but also the users of the facilities around? How are you trying to understand what those users and partners potentially as well, and developers around the stations are looking for?
I think it talks to a lot of Rosemary was suggesting in terms of kind of rather than designing for one specific user group, try and understand and reach out and understand who's there, what's there, and learn. So I think there's a good bit of listening to be done, and I also think she made some good points about just the classic respondees, white males. But then when you come to stations, a lot of the doers are engineers who think in a kind of a certain way and are constrained by a lot of the points that Lee was making about funding, governance, support. So I think there's kind of listening and understanding, and then there's trying to kind of navigate that process. But I also think in terms of having idea, that there's also a bit of a lack of leadership and someone kind of taking a bit of responsibility for certain ideas, because it can be that there's so many voices that you get a bit of design by committee, or like, oh, we don't want to upset. But sometimes you just have to say, look, we think this is right for these reasons, and then you kind of form a narrative which responds to that. And I think that's something kind of lacking in the industry, and I think that's kind of you know, a bit of my experience, you know, coming into Peterborough, which I worked with you on, for example, and I think just it's quite telling in terms of Rosemary's feedback. I think one of the first, when we were walking around the site, the first thing we were looking at the British Transport Police building. I was like, oh, what could that be? And you're like, it's going to be the Peterborough Tap. That like that's clearly like a view of a specific demographic of where can I go to the new certain type of pub that arrives as part of this development. And but we've looked at kind of maybe kind of, you know, bring in the regen team, or kind of a response to what it could be, and more in lines of kind of what Rosemary's feedback is, the Peterborough Tap right. So I think those kind of discussions are really really important. But I think there is just a big thing, especially in stations, of there's a quite a pressure to deliver, and there's quite a pressure to deliver within budgets and just do the project, and trying to get the real qualitative outcomes and make the you know, push it in a direction that's that's slightly more complicated or difficult, but you're doing it for the right reasons. I think that takes some leadership, which I think is quite an important thing to remember. And that, you know, you want to kind of answer some of those questions that Rosemary was raising. Are there too many cars? How are we going to challenge that? Like, that's going to be a battle, but we don't want a car park there. We want a building which is going to have inhabitants, and then it's going to, you know, it's going to add activity to the space, and it's going to have ground floor retail, and it's kind of makes that passenger experience much better in terms of just the rail user. But your original question, kind of who for, but it might be the new residents. It might be trying to understand. It's creating homes. It's creating kind of work, and trying to get under the skin of all that is I think is really important.
That's great, thanks, Steve. And again, keep your message in the chat and the Q&A coming, because I'm quite taken by that. The comment about the design, and Road you started, it's kind of white male able driven, has been in the past sort of thing. So understanding the needs of different users and different personalities, I think is really important.
Just to add, sorry. I mean, what I was meant to. I mean, there is also, as well as kind of asking a lot, it's also just putting yourself in that environment, in a real situation, and understanding what is normal. So, you know, we're all used to kind of streets that are busy, where, you know, there's always lots of technical arguments with how wide does the road need to be, how many dust carts can fit down it, and do you need like huge turning circles? But, you know, we all live in towns, cities, villages where the constraints are actually a good thing. Waiting, conflict is good. There was the question about the fast lane, slow lane, but, you know, conflict is part of human life. You know, wait, let cross. If you put everything in lanes, it's kind of going back to that kind of 60s ideas, and it has real kind of urban impacts. So I think there's a bit of applying kind of situations we're used to in an open context can add.
I think that's really important, and I think that goes back down to this partnerships. Is that, as Rosie said, how do you bring some of those partners in at the start to inform your design? Just come, Lee, pick it. You mentioned funding before, and I think I want to pick this one up with you if I can, and then probably come back on to Rosemary afterwards about this. So often we get funding for major projects like this in particular silos. So do we think the way funding works in this country constrains proper partnership, because everybody's out to get what they can from their individual investments? And what can we kind of do to try and alleviate that constraint?
Well, I was hoping you were going to ask me about the personas one, but anyway.
Okay, you can answer the personas one as well, and answer both at once. Go for it.
Well, no, so the psychology of the built environment is something that really interests me, and we can talk about that for days, but the funding is critically important, because unless you can get that right, nothing is going to work. You're never going to be able to build anything. And you know, the human orientated design is critical, and it's key, and understanding what that is important, but, you know, equally is the funding to be able to do that. I think it fundamentally starts with the business case process and how you get the funding to start with. And you know, Stephen mentioned the qualitative versus the quantitative and what's lacking there. And to be able to create a credible business case that doesn't just rely on quantitative things like, you know, increased journey, reduced travel time, or, you know, how much tons of carbon are you saving, or the economic benefits of that, you know, down to a pound value. There are loads of other things that we need to think about in order to be able to justify that something has got a strong business case because of benefiting the user. That's fundamentally, I think, one of the biggest problems is getting the funding in the first place by acknowledging that there are other things that you need to build into a strong business case besides quantitative things down to a monetary value. That's the first thing. I think the second thing then is securing that funding over the time that the project lifespan requires. You know, when we work in cycles and budget cycles, it's difficult to do that. The bigger the project, the longer the financial commitment, the more difficult it is to secure the funding over the long term. I mean, we've seen earlier on this year, or what could have been at the end of last year, when the Chancellor was announcing the transport funding, the 15.6 billion. You know, that's now, is that going to be available for the lifespan of that project? How is that going to work? How is that secured, or how is it ring fenced? Ring fencing is another critical thing. How that works, and in the shifting political environment, does that suddenly get taken and put somewhere else? And oh, sorry, we've reduced your funding for that project, and you can only build half that station. We can't do that. That's what we need to get right, is that security of the funding for the duration of the project life cycle. And I think that's inhibiting the ability to think big at the moment.
Okay, that's really interesting. Not just now, it's that life cycle funding. Rosemary, on funding, I'll get this feeling might be a bit of an open goal, but do you think the way combined authorities receive funding at the moment constrains some of that proper partnership working? And as Greater Manchester will be one of the trailblazers and integrated settlements, do you think that might make a bit of a difference?
I definitely think the integrated settlement makes a difference, but I would like to take a step back to how projects are delivered. Projects don't go wrong, they start wrong. We talked about how you do projects. You need that clear shared vision and objectives, because with projects, you have different stakeholders. You have the national, you probably have regional, you have local, but you need to take an area-wide based visionary approach to projects. From my experience working on HS2, using the Manchester Airport as an example, HS2 were focused on designing access to the station that would cater for passengers. Local authorities were worried about the adverse impact on the local road network. National Highways was worried about the effects on the strategic network and wanted a bigger design. Manchester Airports Group was worried about impact on access to the airport. No one was taking that visionary area-wide approach to true partnership and delivering the project. So when we talk about this, we're talking about how that works in practice. Lee mentioned governance. I think that is really key to how projects are delivered. You need that governance that shares authority amongst all the stakeholders. When we look at this, we end up working to a benefits cost ratio, but really we're not taking into account all the costs incurred by the stakeholders. And so we're working to this theoretical number that says this project has low value for money or more value for money, but we haven't taken account of the true costs of the projects. So I think there are ways in which this can be, projects can be delivered better. We already know the Green Book review is being undertaken, and next year we expect the outcome of that exercise. But a place-based approach and the talk of a place-based business case is more than welcomed, because that would set the framework upon which different stakeholders begin to key into how that area-wide outcome can be delivered and actually achieved.
Just on that
That's
one,
great.
if I could just pick up on that, something that Rosemary said that reminded me that I should have said earlier on as well, is that the governance aspect of it. When you've got fragmented governance aspects and regulatory aspects associated with the delivery of a project, it gets really complicated to try and get everyone to buy in and for the vision and the end result, and make sure that everyone's pushing in the same direction. And one thing that we did in the Birmingham Stations work that we did with Network Rail is the idea was to develop a vision charter, because you've got Birmingham City Council, you've got Westminster Combined Authority, the Transport for West Midlands, all the rail operators and all of those kind of things that are involved in the outcome of what we're trying to achieve in the long term, need to sign up and agree to that framework, and that governance framework evolves from that. And I think that's key. That everyone, every stakeholder and role player that is required to deliver that outcome in some small part needs to sign up to the overall outcome and commit to the delivery of it through a governance framework.
Absolutely. I think that vision, that clearer vision, and Philip's put it in the Q&A about the vision and what that means for the business case, which we will now come on to, I think, Philip.
Sorry, Jonathan.
So, yes, go on.
Just to finish answering your question about devolution.
Yeah.
So I do think it provides a greater framework and tool for combined authorities to deliver more benefits. Obviously, with big national infrastructure projects, the budget and the responsibility will stay with central government, but under the devolution deal, GM can influence the prioritization as well as the funding of complementary projects. So we, as part of HS2, we're looking at a series of wider connectivity schemes to ensure that the station infrastructure was connected to the local environment. We were also looking at regeneration and how there could be proper integration between the two. The devolution deal really does allow that. So there needs to be a mechanism whereby central government and devolved authorities can sit down and ensure those kind of large proposals and master planning for the area align to deliver greater outcomes.
Thanks, Rosemary. That's great. Yeah, that's really good. Thank you for that. And we might return to devolution just a little bit later on. But so I'm going to turn back to Stephen now. So Stephen mentioned before some of the work we've done on Peterborough, and through the lifetime of that scheme, the benefits in the appraisal went from sort of 70% highway benefits, 30% other benefits, to a point of full business case where there was only about 20% of highway benefits and 80% of other sort of benefits. As a consequence, the benefit cost ratio went down quite a lot, and that aspect of strategic case and placemaking became more important. So Stephen, I guess, how do we better value the infrastructure we provide in terms of the user outcome, carbon benefits, and do we need to take a bit of a more radical approach to that idea of valuing what we do?
I thought you were going to keep that quiet, Jonathan. That changed. I mean, I think so. I mean, yes, we've talked about kind of introducing more qualitative than quantitative in this session. I think that there's something in that. I guess the question is how do you kind of record that as a metrics and rate it against others becomes quite challenging. I think there's kind of things that we can learn from kind of design review panels that we have across the country and a lot of kind of planning authorities now. The rail industry doesn't do it a lot. Network Rail does have guidance on it for kind of mainly for later in the process around stations. It's something that we tried to introduce, kind of a small internal design review panel on schemes. But that is different to the business case. I just think that there's probably some kind of cross learnings about that. I think there. I mean, to talk to the kind of the previous point around costs and the attitude, and I really agree that getting the funding in place and having it clear is really important. But also, rather than thinking of things as cost, we begin more to think of everything as an investment, because everything is an investment in the rail sector. And you think of, you know, all the lines that we use every day, the kind of Victorian infrastructure, as it were, is so you know, the value of that in the long term, you know, it would never have been dreamed to be as big as it is. And I guess there's stuff we need to kind of capture around those kind of things. But I don't have a magic answer to the business case. Yeah. I think there is something about introducing something that's more qualitative. I think there is kind of bringing more expertise in the industry around some of the things we were discussing earlier in terms of reviewing who it's for, how it works, some of the decisions around, is it often too car focused, are the streets and connections in the right place? I think that those could be helpful moves within a kind of process environment that we could think about doing.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Lee, same sort of question to you in terms of how do we better value our infrastructure, but a kind of supplementary one on that, given some of the work that you've been involved with, particularly around Birmingham, is that if we do value it better, does that give that clarity on outcomes and benefits that helps bring partners into the mix?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. And it's not an easy one to quantify, but you know, strategic transport assets are fundamental to functioning of cities and urban centres and growing the economy. If people and things can't move, things don't work, and therefore it has no purpose to exist as a city or you know, an urban agglomeration. So it's critical. You know, it's been said many times by, you know, political leadership and everything else are starting to cotton on to the fact that if this doesn't work, nothing works. So it is massively important. I think something that we don't really do enough of as well, or perhaps need to do more of, is in my experience, is, you know, when you're working out a business case for something, the capital cost is one thing, but what makes it fall down usually is the long-term operational cost of that thing. Particularly things like transport, and transport operations. And I think we need to get a little bit smarter about, and these are emerging conversations that we're having in various places at the moment about innovative finance mechanisms that you can use to generate revenue to bolster the business case or strengthen the business case because you're offsetting operational deficits by other revenue sources like land value capture or whatever it is. And those are the things that I think, we don't necessarily leverage the value of that transport assets enough in that respect.
That's great, thank you. I think that it's interesting that the poll question on this one is almost half of the respondents are picking up that we undervalue the social community aspect and what it means to people, which I think is really, really important. And plays to your point, Stephen, about investment and the point you made at the start, Rosemary, about what an underground station at Piccadilly will do. I'm always struck by when we're looking at potentially like a new rail station, for example, you have to start off with the disbenefit of the delay, the 4-minute delay for stopping that station to all the people on the train. And that becomes a major hurdle to overcome. Whereas if that new station gives a young person an opportunity to get to a new job or to education and puts them onto a life path, which is quite transformational, trying to quantify that is really, really difficult against this 4-minute delay. But the impact of that 4-minute delay on somebody who's going from, say, Birmingham to Newcastle is minimal. The impact of that young person's life choices and where they go in their life is absolutely transformational. And I think we really, really don't value infrastructure in that way and need to potentially do so. So that's great. Thank you very much. Just conscious of time sort of thing. So I'm going to move on to kind of like one of the final questions and then maybe pick up a couple of the Q&As in the box that I've got sort of thing. We're naturally with Stephen and Rosemary, I think here and Lee's experience, we've talked about the railways. Now, we mentioned the Victorians, Stephen, before. They were great railway pioneers. They really celebrated that sense of place, I think, in terms of, that the station talking to its environs sort of thing. So should we really be looking to reinvigorate that Victorian pioneering spirit, that devolved, that public facing but private sector enterprise spirit in our transit-led regeneration going forward? So we'll start off with Rosemary on that one. How can we invoke our Victorian spirit?
This is a really insightful question and a really rich one. Now, I agree with you. The Victorians did celebrate that sense of arrival in a place, that sort of emotional and spatial experience of a passenger arriving at a place. But in today's fiscal constraints contexts, do we have the kind of money to do that? My personal view is that the celebration of arrival at a place should be less infrastructure based and less about the grand architecture and more about customer experience and integration. That design can be achieved through simplicity, coherence, and local character. So what about a station in Birmingham or in London or in Manchester speaks to the passenger to say, you have arrived in Manchester, you have arrived in London? That should be more the focus. We can't afford in this current times to focus on sense of arrival. Now, this question has been posed with regards to the Manchester Airport station. It is viewed as an iconic station, an international gateway to the north, but where we are talking about funding for the station, what should be our true focus? That's sort of the kind of key questions we should be asking. So in my personal experience or opinion, it's more about customer experience and integration.
Can I?
Okay. Yeah, you absolutely. Yeah, this is the question that's meant to get the real creative juices flowing. So yeah,
completely agree with that. I think. I mean, even Rosemary's picked a few words there which are unhelpful, which I kind of also agree are unhelpful, like gateway or iconic. I also find the word hub unhelpful in that it kind of implies everything goes into a space with a box around it. And what Rosemary was implying around it's about the place, it's about the streets. So we should, and it kind of talks to the earlier question about designing for the public. People come in, oh, what do we need? What's this space need? What's this station need? It needs to be iconic. It needs 700 spaces. It needs all this stuff. Whereas really we should be thinking, what does the town need? How can we extend that street? And all of the best experiences. I mean, you think of that, you know, a lot of the small stations in London and other cities are where it's kind of within the street, within the building, and it feels like you're part of the town street. Even the kind of station parade is kind of part of something where you have kind of, it kind of feels like it's part of the local network. So I think there's a lot in that, in yeah, really designing for the environment and let the context set the tone. Yeah, totally agree. But I do like good architecture. It just doesn't need to be iconic. I think there's a thing about making good choices.
Well, what does iconic mean? You know,
Yeah.
what's
Yes.
iconic now and what's iconic in 50 years' time might be two different things. We're back to the psychology of it all now. Interesting. This is really interesting to me because my transport planning and engineering brain is telling me that the most important thing is functionality, and that it's got to be seamless and integrated, and all transport modes work together, and the user experience is seamless and it's quick and it's functional, and it connects to the rest of the city, and it works in a big multimodal system. That's the one aspect of it. But my human brain is telling me, what do I feel when I'm there? And I think we don't think about that enough. And it doesn't have to be expensive to be beautiful, I don't think. And that's something that I think we need to think about a little bit more, because, you know, a couple of years ago, I was in my engineering-y kind of brain was developing an urban development index for a metropolitan city, which measured transformation over time. And we were measuring things like changes in mode share and travel time and the usual quantitative stuff. And during that process, I met a traveling professor from Tokyo University who was working on a happiness index. And I got to have a sit down and have a conversation with him. And the happiness index that he was working on, it sounds funny, right? But it was about how do people feel about the built environment or their life, and what are the things that can influence that. And it was really interesting to me because we always just look at these cold, hard facts. But in actual fact, what we need to be doing is designing places that make people happy to be there and want to be there, because that increases productivity, it promotes economic investment and development, and people travel easier because of that, you know, if it's seamless as well. So we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Functional first, but beautiful is just as important.
That's great, Lee. So John Carr just asked a really good question in the Q&A sort of thing. Do we let risk constrain us too much in the idea of this visioning of what we're trying to do with partnerships? Rosemary.
Definitely, I think we do, and we can't help it. From my experience working on HS2, we as stakeholders could request for design changes, but those design changes come with risks. And at the end of the day, those risks have cost implications or program implications in terms of delivery. So yes, we do, we're a bit risk adverse, and we can't help it because there are consequences of doing that. But what we shouldn't let it do is prevent us from delivering what the customer or the user requires, be it disabled users, be it people that have got other challenges. We need to be cognizant of those in our delivery. So yes, we do allow risk to dictate some of the design that we put out, but I would like to believe as professionals that we temper that and still deliver what users require.
Okay,
so
that's
risk is a really good question. I think you know, we tending to be risk averse in decision making is it's you know, it's the worst thing that can happen to you. It paralyzes you and you can't do anything. But understanding risk and the things that make up the risk, such as severity and probability, and understanding those things for the particular risk that you're thinking about is important, because the severity might be it might be severe impact if it goes wrong, but the probability is low. You know, or the other way around. So understanding that, I think, is important. The other thing that, you know, we've looked at a lot in land development projects to navigate uncertainty of, you know, can you achieve your sustainable outcome in the future? What if everyone just keeps driving cars and it doesn't work? Instead of building all of the worst case scenario infrastructure now and then inevitably ending up with all the cars because you created the capacity and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, is don't build it all, build what you need right now and then incrementally build it up as you go along. So that gives you the ability to reassess and adapt. So I think, you know, catalytic incrementalism is something that we need to think about more with strategic infrastructure as well. You know, things like starting off with a bus lane and ending up as a tram or something like that. And there's ways, you know, lots of nuances to that. Obviously, I'm oversimplifying now, but incrementalism is a way to navigate risk that I don't think we do enough of.
Just
Thanks, Lee.
just to add,
go on, yeah, go for it, Stephen. Yeah.
just to add that, I mean, I think it's a good question, and I agree with all those points. And I think it's something where Platform 4 is trying to break the tradition by taking more risk. So things like taking on the planning application at Liverpool Street Station to drive the value ourselves, that is new for the rail industry. That might have been something that the in terms of the development world, that was given to a developer or kind of site sold, where we're looking to take things much further now in partnership with others. I think that's how, as well as taking risks, to drive value and have confidence in your own expertise. And I think those are important things.
Thanks, Stephen. Just one picking up the last poll question. One of the things that people felt was really important when designing, they actually said designing hubs, but we're going to ban hubs. We're going to have a square box for hubs, that sort of thing. Yeah, when we do this, was about that onward connectivity and how, you know, stations and facilities bleed into and interact with their towns. And again, from a Platform 4 perspective, do you see Platform 4 working much more hand in glove with combined authorities and local authorities on that? Because that goes beyond that initial, you know, sort of like rail station environment, but it's absolutely critical, isn't it? For, you know, sometimes they're destinations, but obviously they're stepping stones to other parts of towns and cities. Especially if you don't put a Peterborough tap outside there, you've got to go somewhere else to get your beer.
I know. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's essential, and listening and making it part of the city, making it unique. You know, there's never one size fits all. One size doesn't fit anybody. So I think it's very important to kind of to work with the local environments and make and kind of develop things in such a way. So, I mean, good transport can be part of the environment and be functional. So, for example, you know, what's the busiest night bus interchange? It's not a bus station, it's Trafalgar Square, and no one thinks it's a bus interchange. Everyone thinks it's a great public space. And you know, you can compare Euston, which is a hub where everything kind of comes in and then gets confused, or King's Cross, where the streets do the work and it just arrives, and it's about defining the environment. So those are the kind of clues we're looking for, and we've been kind of bringing to these other places like, you know, Sheffield, Manchester, and Peterborough you mentioned, to try and learn from that.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you very much. So I've shared some of the results of the polls and the quizzes sort of that we set up for you there. Thank you very much. That's been really illuminating. Thank you all for your point of view. Thank you for your questions and your comments in the chat and the Q&A. I'm sorry that I couldn't get around to all of them. I know there's a lot of conversation going on. Please keep that conversation going on. That's seriously what good debate and good partnerships are about, having those genuinely honest conversations. But with 1 minute left, it just serves me to say thank you very much to the guests on the webinar today, to Rosemary, to Stephen, and to Lee, for bringing their real insights into this idea of what partnerships can be and what we can do. Thank you very much to Dima and Paul at Meeting of Minds for putting on the webinar. I hope you've really enjoyed it. There's been some really thoughtful conversations. Please do keep those conversations going. And as I said at the start, please, if you haven't done it already, register for Interchange. We will really, really go through this in a lot more detail. I'm sure some of the themes today will start influencing some of the workshops and some of the discussions we have at Interchange as well. So if you've got any more ideas, send them through to the team at Interchange, and I'm sure we can craft sort of particular activities around the needs of the people. But thank you very much for joining. I hope you have a really good afternoon or evening or morning, I say, whenever you're watching this. And I hope to meet you all soon. And I hope to have a great partnership with a lot of the people on this call at some point soon as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jonathan.